Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good Friday. I wanted to take us on a field trip today. So we are going to go up to the Arctic and we are going to be learning about polar bears and learning about how polar bears have adapted to survive in the extremely cold climate that is the Arctic, and also how scientists are working to help preserve the polar bears and protect them. So they're also going to tell us how things that we can do at home to help protect the environment, just little things at home within our own environment. So stay tuned. I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to get started.
They live in one of this planet's harshest environments,
with an exceptional mix of physical and behavioral adaptations.
Their survival comes down to their ability to find and conserve energy.
And our ability to reduce energy consumption.
Their environment is melting away and time is running out.
But there is hope, and more than ever, the solutions involve your everyday actions. Hello and welcome to Saving the Species. I'm Bill Street. For today's program, we've teamed up with experts from Polar Bears International. And with their help, we're going to show you stunning, rarely seen views of polar bears in the Arctic and the changes happening to their environment. But first, we need to kick this off with one very important idea. We're connected to polar bears in ways that affect their habitat and their survival. Our own Chuck Carreau explains.
It's hard to imagine a wilderness more inaccessible than the home of the polar bear. Only animals adapted to survive in the extreme cold stand a chance here. Among those animals, the polar bear is the epitome of specialized adaptation. You're looking at one of the Earth's top predators, but in its primary habitat, it usually doesn't see any land.
Now think about it. You're one of the toughest predators to ever walk the face of the Earth. But the Earth really isn't Earth at all. It's just a thin layer of frozen water. Now, no matter how tough you are, you're always vulnerable to one possibility. Turn up the temperature just a few degrees, and everything you depend upon for survival could simply melt away.
You know, for most of us, this is about as close as we'll ever get to an actual polar bear. Places like SeaWorld's Wild Arctic can literally bring you nose to nose with polar bears. Whoa, that is pretty close, and it's really cool. But you know, your connection to and your impact on polar bears is a lot closer than you think. Let's start off with a little geography. Right now, I'm in Orlando, Florida, but let's say I want to hightail it over to San Diego, California. Well, it's not quite that easy. Truth is, I'd have to drive or fly about 2,400 miles. But hey, it's no big deal. People make this trip all the time, right? Now, let's say I'm back in Orlando. But this time, I want to go north to the closest known polar bear territory. Well, the southernmost range of polar bears in North America is only about 600 miles north of the U.S. border. That means my trip to see a polar bear would actually be shorter than my trip to San Diego.
Some polar bears live in Hudson Bay and Labrador, very close to the United States. But the entire range of polar bears includes 5 nations and vast expanses of frozen Arctic Ocean.
Humans aren't just close to polar bears geographically. The decisions we make and the things we do in our everyday home life are having a profound effect on polar bear habitat. Here's why. Many of the things that we do every day produce an invisible gas called carbon dioxide. Trust me, it's there. The carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is super important. It helps trap some of the sun's energy, kind of like a blanket, keeping the temperature just right. It's also one of the ingredients of photosynthesis, where carbon dioxide, along with water, produce energy and the oxygen that we breathe. Between carbon dioxide and oxygen, it's a constant, natural balancing act. But now, that balance is harder to come by. Every time we produce or burn energy, we usually release more carbon dioxide. And nowadays, we're using more energy than ever. And deforestation reduces our planet's ability to convert all this extra carbon dioxide into oxygen. Instead, that carbon dioxide is building up in the atmosphere. And now add up all the carbon dioxide emissions from all the energy-consuming items that we use every day and
what you've got as a result is like someone throwing a second blanket over the Earth's atmosphere. Is it hot in here? Or is it just me?
it'd be great if we could somehow build a bubble around the Arctic and protect it from the rising temperatures and melting ice. But we can't.
The only solution that we can directly control is to change human behavior. We have to make smarter choices about our energy consumption. And that means smarter choices in just about everything we do, where we live and work, how we get around, and what we choose to eat. We need to choose, build, and live sustainably.
Easier said than done, right? Imagine I told you you had to adjust your thermostat, cut down on your time with a blow dryer, or tell mom she's got a carpool to work. Just how tough would that be? Let's find out. This is Spencer, and this is Spencer's family. They've agreed to help us with a little experiment. For the period of a week, Spencer will play Energy Cop, working to get his family to conserve energy wherever possible. Spencer will record whatever happens on camera, and we'll learn firsthand what it takes to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and hopefully make a positive difference for polar bears.
We'll have the results later in the program. But now it's time to turn our attention to the Arctic. As you're about to see, polar bears may be one of the strongest, most well-adapted animals in their domain. But even for them, survival in the Arctic is a daily struggle.
If you picture the Arctic as a lifeless, frozen space, then get your head out of the freezer.
And get ready for the real Arctic.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Robin. And we're here to show you what it takes to survive in the Arctic. First, you've got to have the right gear for the job.
And polar bears have awesome gear for life in the Arctic.
Underneath all that fur, there's an incredibly thick hide. And underneath that thick hide are several inches of fat. It all serves as head-to-toe insulation.
In fact, polar bear insulation is so good that they're more likely to get overheated than to feel the effects of the cold. Now let's talk paws. A polar bear's paw is kind of like this multi-purpose tool with a lot of functions all in one. Thick, textured pads provide extra protection on sharp, broken ice and traction on slick, slippery ice.
Those paws are also super wide. I'm talking as wide as a dinner plate.
That extra width makes the paw more like an oar, allowing polar bears to paddle through icy waters and swim huge distances.
Large paws also serve another purpose, weight displacement. Despite their huge size, a bear's weight is distributed evenly, allowing them to stay high and dry on thin ice humans wouldn't dare set foot on.
Then there are the claws. Polar bear claws are short and strongly curved, almost like hooks, allowing the ice bear to grab and keep hold on even the slipperiest prey.
And look at these teeth, 42 of them, all designed for ripping and tearing at maximum speed.
And we can't forget the nose. A polar bear's nose is highly sensitive and helps with locating prey from great distances. They have one of the most sensitive noses in the animal world. It's clear, the polar bear is equipped to be the Arctic's most effective predator.
And even those visual details that make the polar bears seem so lovable, like cute little ears and a tiny tail.
That's not cute, that's function. Smaller extremities mean less heat loss. Everything about a polar bear is suited to the Arctic environment. And here's why that's important.
This is the true Arctic, a place that's always expanding, shrinking, a place where ice is always on the move. That means the bear's food source is always on the move. You tell them.
No, you're doing great.
Okay, fine. Look, here's the deal. A bear's primary food source is seals. I know they're adorable, but a bear's gotta make a living.
And boy, do they ever. With all that blubber, seals are a high-calorie, made-to-order package of perfect polar bear power.
So to understand what motivates a polar bear, you've got to understand what motivates a seal. And to do that, you've got to turn the world upside down.
Now imagine this cup of ice is the Arctic. Up top, everything is calm. But below the ice, sunlight is poking through.
That sunlight creates algae and tiny plant life. This algae and plant life serve as a food source for small invertebrates and tiny fish. And guess who enjoys eating the fish? Seals.
Seals hunt for food beneath the ice, but they're air-breathing mammals, so they dig and maintain breathing holes in the ice. These breathing holes help seals survive, but in some cases, it also spells their doom.
That's because the polar bear knows all about those breathing holes and is more than willing to wait it out for the next seal male swimming just beneath the ice. More often than not, the wait doesn't pay off, but on those occasions when the seal finally does come up for air, that's it for the seal.
For the bear, this seems like a pretty sweet setup. But remember, this is the Arctic, and the Arctic is continually changing. Animals like ringed seals, bearded seals, and the Arctic fox all know they have to stay on the move and go where the food is. The same is true for polar bears.
So take that heavy insulation, the paws, the claws, the teeth, the nose, and all those special adaptations. And that would all be nothing if the polar bears didn't have a keen sense of food on the move.
It's the ability to follow food sources far and wide that may be the polar bear's greatest asset, and what puts this predator at the top of the Arctic food chain.
As Robin and Tim just explained, polar bears are perfectly suited for their environment. But that also means that they are completely dependent upon their environment. For polar bears, living on Arctic ice is the only option.
Even with all the adaptations that place them at the top of the Arctic food chain, polar bears still need to live by one unforgiving reality. The amount of energy spent has to be less than the amount of energy being taken in and stored. Consider this apple. It contains around 95 calories. At most, I'll burn a couple of calories in the process of grabbing it and eating it. Nutritionally, that's a pretty good deal. Hey! Now, let's say someone takes that same apple and places it in a really high place. To get that same 95 calories, I now have to climb up the tree and climb back down. In the process, I could lose hundreds of calories. Suddenly, this deal's looking like a bad apple. Here's how that principle applies to polar bears. Let's imagine a bear sees or smells many seals in the distance. She could dash around hoping to catch one, but most seals would hear her coming and escape. The energy consumed in that kind of hunt could outstrip the energy gained from eating a seal, even if she did catch it.
A better method is a slow, planned stalk. Bears can be very stealthy as they sneak up on a seal hauled out on the sea ice. The bear takes advantage of channels melted in the sea ice to keep a low profile and sneak up on the seal without being seen. The bear stays mostly hidden in the water with only its head and maybe its shoulders above the surface. The rest of the bear is down below, kind of like an iceberg. It takes some work, but this can be a pretty effective way for the polar bear to balance its energy output and its energy input.
Another highly effective hunting method is what's called still hunting. The bear uses the ice as a hunting platform and simply waits for a seal to come up for air at a breathing hole. The bear literally plucks the seal out of the hole. By waiting for the food to come to her, the bear has expended far less energy and has now gained all the calorie-filled fat and protein from an easier, quick kill. If polar bears were able to stay put in one place, then conserving energy wouldn't be as big of a deal. However, because ice changes with the seasons, the landscape, or rather ice-scape, is never the same. The ice is on the move, seals are on the move, and so then are polar bears. It may seem like a tough life, and it certainly isn't easy. But the balance between food source, miles traveled, and energy consumed works perfectly for the bear. That is, unless something comes along and changes the equation.
Polar bears live throughout the circumpolar Arctic, and therefore they experience a wide variety of sea ice types. But polar bears really make their living in what might be called the Arctic Ring of Life. This is shallow water areas adjacent to the northern coasts of the land masses that ring the Arctic, That ring of life depends on having a certain amount of ice in certain areas for a long enough period, but it is disappearing at an alarming rate.
Polar bears depend on sea ice, not just for hunting and traveling, but also for mating, and in some populations, for creating dens where mother polar bears nurture their young.
The only time you typically see polar bears hauled out on land is when they've been forced ashore as the sea ice has melted entirely. But there's nothing on land for them to eat that's as nutritious as the rich seals that they can catch when they're out on the sea ice. So they come ashore, they wait for the ice to return, and they're saving energy. They've slowed down and they're surviving on just the stored fat that they hope will get them through until the sea ice and the food supply returns.
And that's the essential dilemma of a polar bear's existence. They may be the dominant animal on the ice, but if you put them anywhere else in the world, they wouldn't stand a chance. They're so perfectly adapted to life on the Arctic sea ice that for them, there's no other option. You take away the ice, and you take away the polar bear.
Remember though, when it comes to climate change and melting ice, it's not a hopeless situation. You can make a difference. Coming up, Chuck Carreau will share the results of our special energy savings experiment. One teenager trying to reduce his family's energy consumption.
They left every light in the house on because they were afraid of a scary movie, so I need to talk to them about that. Why is there a light on when nobody's in the room?
We'll have the full results in a few minutes. But first, another kind of challenge. There are still a lot of things that we don't know about polar bears. Filling those knowledge gaps requires risk, spirit, and a lot of innovation.
When it comes to studying polar bears, nothing is easy. The Arctic is one of the least accessible, harshest environments on Earth.
And the bears themselves, let's just say they're not the most cooperative subjects. Nobody knows that better than the researchers at Polar Bears International.
To get to know their subjects, they spend a lot of time on sea ice, watching, tracking, and observing polar bears in a way few people ever get to experience. So, let's hear them tell it.
The first rule to observing polar bears is to do no harm to the bears, and also to keep the observer out of harm's way. Sometimes we can do this with remote control cameras and cameras with long lenses. But if we really want to obtain meaningful data, that requires capturing, tagging, and radio collaring polar bears.
Our goal is to totally understand bear ecology and behavior, to find out where they go to mate, to have their cubs, what kind of food they catch, and it seems like on these questions we're learning something new almost every day.
But the most frequently asked question, and the one most difficult to answer, is
how many polar bears are there?
Scientists have been trying to answer that one for decades. Here's what we know.
Polar bears exist across 5 of the 8 nations that fall within the Arctic Circle and can be divided into 19 separate regional populations.
Add all those populations together, and the current estimate shows a total of about 20,000 polar bears.
You might think counting polar bears is a simple problem. The sea ice is wide open, not a lot of places for bears to hide.
A quick aerial survey should be able to settle the question pretty quickly.
I wish. When you see close-up footage like this, it's easy to forget how effective the polar bear's white camouflage can be.
But up in the air, it's a whole different story.
Polar bears are nothing more than small white dots on an impossibly large white background. A standard visual count just isn't going to do it. Forward-looking infrared or FLIR cameras can detect polar bears because they are warm bodies against the background of snow and ice.
See that different colored spot? This image, taken from a plane, shows the heat from a polar bear's body. Under the right circumstances, FLIR lets scientists catch what they've missed with the naked eye. It's been especially helpful in locating occupied dens under the snow. However, FLIR is not the best for searching for bears across the expanse of the pack ice. Imagine you have to search a large area to find a lost dime by only looking through a soda straw. Eventually, you might find it, but you're only getting a very tiny part of a really large picture at one time.
Simply counting bears is just too great a challenge, and even technologies like FLIR will miss polar bears out on the sea ice.
The most accurate counts of polar bears have come through a process that's costly, time-intensive, and potentially dangerous. But over the past decades, tagging bears has proved the best way to count bear populations from year to year.
By physically placing a number tag on the bear, we're assured that that bear is accounted for and that it won't be confused with another bear. If we place a radio collar on a bear, we can get a handle on its movements from year to year and understand how those movements may change as the sea ice changes in a warming environment.
Of course, there's no way to tag an active polar bear and live to tell the tale.
Instead, researchers use tranquilizing darts. Once the bear's sedated, they're able to apply the tag without any harm to the researchers or the bears.
A tagged bear can yield years of ongoing information about general bear numbers and movements. But now, thanks to innovations in satellite technology, that flow of information is breaking new ground.
For years, we've been putting radio transmitting collars on polar bears with excellent results. At first, we followed collared bears with airplanes. Their movements, however, were too great to effectively follow by airplane. Newer satellite radio collars allow us to follow them anywhere, and we can get daily transmissions. It's GPS for polar bears. At any time, we can pinpoint the whereabouts of a collared bear, and by collecting data over an extended period, we can start to paint exact pictures of bear movements and migration.
That's information that's absolutely critical as scientists try to gauge the impact of climate change.
And melting polar bear habitat.
Most scientists agree that the rising temperatures and the resulting loss of Arctic ice are linked to the buildup of excess carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. A way we can help is to control our energy consumption and reduce our use of fossil fuels. Easier said than done? To find out, we put an average family to the test.
By most measures, high school senior Spencer and his family are already pretty conservative energy consumers. They keep the AC on a reasonable setting, they don't leave a lot of lights on. By average standards, this family is already pretty tight with a kilowatt. And here we have Spencer, the man in person. Spencer, we gave you a huge challenge.
You did. It was to get my family to save even more energy than we normally do.
And so what came first?
What came first is I had to learn a lot of power-saving tips from the local power company.
There are quite a few things you and your family can do, simple behavioral things that will reduce your energy use. One thing I noticed is you have some ceiling fans here in the family room, and they're going all the time, but there's no one here to enjoy the breeze. Ceiling fans cool people, not rooms. So when there's no one in the room, switch off the fan and you'll see savings.
Okay. Other tips included turning down our water heater, running the pool pump for shorter cycles, turning off computers and televisions, and taking shorter showers, just to name a few.
Now, Spencer, I understand you did something really cool. You kept a video diary of the challenge week?
Yeah, I recorded as much as I could, including me recording our power usage during a normal week.
84531. All right, that is the number today.
In a normal week, we use 663 kilowatts, but now, in this challenge week, we had to do better.
All right, so day 2, turned off a lot of lights. That's most of what I've been doing so far. I turned off the computer after I finished using it. This morning, I turned off the water between, soaping up and this and then rinsing.
Saving hot water was one of the toughest parts of the challenge all the way around.
My mom's taking a little bit too much time in the shower. Mama?
What?
How long have you been in the shower now?
A Maroon 5 song, a Boston song. I'm hurrying.
All right, hurry faster.
Okay.
Thank you, Mama. See how simple it is? It's not that hard to, teach people. You're training. I'm teaching my family to be better conserving energy.
Playing the role of energy cup meant I wasn't always the most popular person in the house.
Haley?
Yes?
Who left the kitchen light on?
Not me.
Was it one of them?
I don't know.
But the family was more than willing to turn the tables.
Did somebody leave a TV on?
But I'm in my room. Thank you, Dad.
All right.
All week, we combined car trips and drove fewer miles.
Listen, you're walking home.
I'm walking home today. Because that'll save a lot of mileage.
We used our washer and dryer on cooler, more energy-efficient settings. I also enlisted my dad's help with our pool pump.
Right now we've got it set. No, we've got it set 10 to 10. We've got it set 12 hours. So we're going to cut it back. We still got to maintain the pool, so it's got to run at least 10 hours. So we're going to back it off 2 hours. So there you go.
Unfortunately, we reset the pool pump a little late into our challenge week, but it was a start, and every little bit helps.
So Spencer, I am dying to find out, how did you guys do?
Well, we saved 123 kilowatts, and we drove 146 miles fewer than we did the week before.
Yeah, so was that what you were hoping for?
Well, by the end of the week, the number wasn't as good as we hoped, but it's a start.
Wait a minute, let's put things into perspective here. You saved 1/10 of an average energy bill in this region, and you did that in 1 week. Also, the more kilowatt hours saved means less carbon dioxide. Now, multiply that savings by all the households in America and multiply that savings over the entire year. That's a huge impact.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, and thank you and your family for doing that and leading the way.
My pleasure.
And now the challenge really begins. We're going to put the focus on you. Julie Scardina joins us with the top 5 things that you and your family can do to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and make a positive impact on our warming planet.
Okay, I'm about to count down 5 things that you can do today to help reduce your carbon footprint and actually save money. And after each tip, we'll also share an important fact about the melting polar bear habitat, just to remind us of what's at stake. Here we go, starting with tip number 5, air drying. By not using your dishwasher's heat dry cycle and by choosing to air dry your laundry instead of using the dryer, that's a significant reduction in your monthly energy use. While you're considering that first tip, also consider this. If you took Alaska, Washington State, and Texas and put them together into one super landmass, that would give you some idea of the amount of summer ice loss from the Arctic in recent years. And now, counting down to number 4, phantom power. Turning off unused lights is an obvious good practice. But most people don't think about devices such as computers, stereos, TVs, and cable boxes. They may appear to be off, but they're actually drawing phantom power all day long. Plug those devices into a power strip, and then turn the power strip off when they're not in use. Here's why actions like that are important.
Studies have shown in the Hudson Bay area that polar bears are forced ashore earlier as the climate has warmed. This gives bears less time to hunt. They're forced ashore before they've packed on enough calories to make it through the summer. Here and elsewhere in the Arctic, polar bears clearly are in distress.
And here's tip number 3, thermostats. Your thermostat is a powerful tool for energy control. A programmable thermostat can reduce energy use when you don't need it as much. Setting the thermostat lower or higher by just a few degrees can reduce emissions and save energy and money. And don't forget, your water heater also has a thermostat. Most water heaters are set way too high, wasting energy. Have an adult lower it just a little each day until it feels like it's just not hot enough. Then raise it a little.
A growing body of evidence has suggested we've got malnourished bears clear around the Arctic. In certain areas, we've seen underweight bears, bears with smaller body stature showing changed behaviors, even some bears digging through thick sea ice in order to try and catch seals that are long gone by the time they get there.
And now for tip number 2, energy efficient devices. Older appliances and devices just don't have the same energy efficiency as newer ones. When it's time to replace an appliance in your home, look for this sticker, and then look for the highest energy efficiency number you can find. Refrigerators, washers and dryers, and heaters and air conditioners are some of the appliances that use the most energy.
If polar bears are in trouble, that's a sign that the whole ecosystem may be weakening. The algae that live on the underside of the ice, the bacteria, the small shrimp-like creatures that feed on those, the fish, and the seals that ultimately feed the polar bears. If polar bears are in trouble, it can be an indication that this whole system is crumbling.
And finally, our top energy-saving tip, and maybe the easiest one to do. Replace your existing light bulbs with energy-efficient bulbs. These often use less than 1/5 of the energy of regular bulbs. Energy-efficient bulbs also now come in all shapes and sizes and can replace nearly all of the lights in your home. I promise you that just changing all of the light bulbs in your house will not only reduce emissions and energy use, but you'll see a big difference on your energy bill. Well, that's it for our top 5. And when it comes to how you can help save polar bears, it's all about reducing our carbon footprint and slowing climate change.
And we hope that's the message you take away from this edition of Saving a Species. The adjustments we make in our own lives can have a direct effect on this magnificent icon of the Arctic. There's no animal in the world quite like a polar bear. And with our combined awareness and efforts, we can preserve this animal for generations to come. We hope you'll visit shamotv.com and learn even more about this amazing animal and the effects of climate change. You can also become a fan of the SeaWorld and Busch Gardens Conservation Fund Facebook page. Until next time, I'm Bill Street, saying thanks to our friends at Polar Bears International for their help, and thanks to you for watching and for your part in saving a species.
All right, how great was that, guys? So, I thought that was a really great video to kind of learn about another species, especially one that's in a completely different environment than us. I mean, if you think about the Arctic, think about having lots and lots of snow. They don't see much ground, it's mostly ice. So the adaptations, they had to change their bodies over time and generations to survive. So think about what changed in a polar bear, especially if you think about the brown bears and black bears we have here in our region on the East Coast. So polar bears are white. They've changed their fur color. It's a lot thicker. Their paws are the size of a plate. So not only they're big enough to carry the wide load of a polar bear, but it's also helped to distribute weight evenly and easier on the ice, okay? So if something is spread out further, it distributes its weight a little bit easier. They have the long claws to catch their prey. 42 teeth, 42 large, sharp teeth to catch their prey. They've also had to adapt how they hunt because they use so much energy just moving their large, massive bodies that if they don't strategically plan how they're hunting their seals, they can use more energy than they actually gain by eating their dinners. So they've learned to use the currents in the rivers to help them along, okay, to stalk their prey in a way, all right? So, and then what I also found interesting was how scientists are actually counting the polar bears because it's hard to count a wild animal. They're spread out far out in the Arctic. So one thing they've started doing is temporarily tranquilizing the polar bears so they can safely get close to them and tagging them. And what they do, they put a little tag on their ear, and that helps to track the movement of the polar bear. So where are they? Where do they go? Their paths along the migrations, okay, to kind of see how they're surviving, where they're living, maybe what food source they're eating there in that area. Think about it as a GPS for polar bears, okay? So it doesn't hurt them at all. It just kind of helps to keep them safer. I loved at the end of this video how it really talked about how we here in Delaware in our homes can help to protect the environment here, which help in turn protects the environment where the polar bears are. Things like turning a light off, turning a fan off when you're not in the room, turn the TV off when you leave that room to go eat dinner, turn the TV off in your bedroom. Nobody's in there watching it, doesn't need to be running. It saves energy, which helps protect our environment and your family's electric bills, which is something to think about. I found it really interesting that the boy who was tracking the energy use in his family, by carpooling together and riding together as a family to certain destinations and really planning their week, they drove like 147 less miles, I think, that week, which not only saves money on gas, but think about all those gas fumes that are being prevented from being released into the environment, which goes up into the ozone, which affects the air quality and the ozone and the ice melting. And then the 5 things at the end, kind of like just conserving energy. If you can air dry your clothing, hang them on a line, do that every now and then and save the energy. Use lower settings on your heater and your wash cycles, okay, to save that energy. Again, turn off those devices. If you're not in the room or you're going away on an extended holiday or extended vacation, unplug your TVs, unplug your computers and your microwaves, okay? Unplug your lights. That way no energy is being pulled from them to use them, all right? Your thermostats. Turn off your or turn down your thermostat when you're not home. If you have a programmable thermostat, they're amazing for that energy saving. You don't need to be heating your house at 67 degrees during the wintertime when nobody's home for 7 hours a day. So programmable thermostats. Your energy efficient devices, if you're getting a new refrigerator or a new microwave, new stove, new dishwasher, a lot of them come with that sticker on the front. Usually it's yellow that says the energy saving, how much energy are you saving throughout the year by average by having this newer device. And then they mentioned at the end replacing light bulbs. So those are just simple things you can do at home every day that help to conserve energy. Okay, besides like we talked about the other day with recycling, okay? So just different great things. So I think this was a really exciting field trip because I love polar bears. I love learning about animals, but I really liked how it related how we can help the polar bears here at home by doing small things, which in turn helps the environment and the environment as a whole, okay? So I'm glad to see you guys today, and hopefully I will see you Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning for our Zoom session then. Have a great weekend, everybody.